Okay, nice to have you here. And today I would like to share with you about what I view as the three essentials for accomplishment in life. And so we'll get into that in just a moment. First, I want to set the intention so that it's clear what the overall purpose and function of the meeting is. And so overall, this is to support you in self-knowledge and true fulfillment in your life. So if that seems like something of interest to you, then I guess you're in the right place. And if not, then I guess maybe you're not in the right place. I don't know. You could find out. Um, so the this is really about both. It's really about the whole person. It's about you, the totality of you. So it's about you as a spiritual being. It's about you as a being with a material reality and material fulfillment and material needs and desires. So it's both. It's not one or the other. And I point this out as I usually do because I think that that's important to understand because sometimes they think they're only looking for one or the other. So sometimes people think that they're only looking for material stuff. And that's not going to lead to real satisfaction, as sometimes people discover the hard way because they work really, really hard to achieve material things, only then to later on down the line discover that they still feel empty, even though they've achieved all the material things that they wanted. And on the other hand, there are sometimes people who think that all they want is spiritual stuff. They just want spiritual attainment or spiritual success or spiritual development. And depending on how they define that, of course, they may find that that ends up being problematic because maybe on the one hand, they can sit in meditation, enter into a state of oneness and experience bliss for maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or 5 hours or however long, maybe 5 days. But then at some point, the party seems to be over temporarily. And then they're met with the difficult challenges of their material life where, their relationships are not working very well and maybe their finances aren't working really well. And maybe they've got some health challenges and whatever might be the case. And so then people in that situation don't really know what to do because they haven't developed the skills in order to be able to help themselves materially. So this is about both. It's both about the spiritual and the material and how they complement one another because in fact you are one being, not a partial being. And so I make this point often, but I'll make it again because it's worth making, which is I liken it to a coin. So all coins have two sides. Somebody did recently remark that there's Bitcoin, and I suppose maybe Bitcoin has no sides, but any physical coin has two sides. So this is relevant because um, we can think about a coin as having two sides, but in fact, it's one coin because you've never actually been able to see or experience a one-sided coin. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And so, in a similar way, we can think of ourselves as having these two aspects, a spiritual aspect and a material aspect. But in fact, we're one being. There's only one being. You cannot meaningfully divide that. So, you could not become just a spiritual being devoid of material reality. Neither could you become merely a material being devoid of a spiritual reality. They go together. You are one being with dual aspects. And so learning how to know yourself at all levels and then to have some degree of mastery over your experience is, from my point of view, important and useful. And so that's what we explore in these meetings. So I think that covers the basics, the preliminary. So today, as I said, I'm going to share with you about what I view as the three essentials for accomplishment in life. And, you know, I I have some kind of theme each week, but I also think it's worth pointing out that actually, in truth, it's always fundamentally the same thing because it's always about understanding yourself, knowing yourself, and having mastery over your experience. And so even though when I say something like the three essentials of accomplishment and whatever the topic of the day may be, that might sound exciting and new, but actually, if you're really paying attention, you'll notice it's always kind of the same thing. There may be certain new um, nuances that you haven't understood or heard before, but the fundamentals are the same. And I think that's really important to understand because otherwise, you can get lost in the weeds, as it were, because you might think, oh, there's so much uh, complication that I have to understand before I can get anywhere. And actually, it's not like that at all. It's really quite simple. Uh, and so when you really stay with the simplicity, then you will discover much more versus if you're always looking for novelty, if you're looking for the new stuff, the new flashy knowledge or information, then that will distract you. So the simple is where you want to keep your attention because that's going to help you have better results. So these three essentials for accomplishment probably will not be a big surprise to anybody if you've been here before. And if they are a surprise to you, then I guess that will be interesting for you to find out. Um, so two of them, at the very least, two of them should not be any surprise to anybody who's been around because I talk about them a lot. And so I'll talk about them briefly today, but then I'll take more time with the third essential. So the first two essentials are intention. That's the first one. So intention is what do you want? So the intention is what it is that you want. And so if you want to accomplish anything, you first have to know what you want. Almost should go without saying, except that we have to say it because if not, then a lot of the time we'll overlook that. So I know it probably seems obvious, but don't be quick to dismiss it just because it seems obvious, because again, you'll get the most leverage with the simple things. And if you're overlooking the simple things, then you will waste a lot of your time and energy. So even though you might say, oh, yeah, that's obvious, of course, you have to know what you want before you can make any progress toward accomplishing it. But just take a moment to really let that sink in. So just really actually notice that in your actual experience. So just notice that in order to accomplish anything, whether that's a spiritual accomplishment, a material accomplishment, any kind of accomplishment, you have to know what you want. So that would be true if you wanted to have a certain amount of money. It would be true if you wanted to learn a new skill. It would be true if you wanted to make improvements in how you relate to others. It would be true if you wanted to strengthen your body. It would be true if you wanted to change the way that you eat. It would be true whatever any kind of thing that you want in any domain of your life. You have to know what you want. If you don't know what you want, then what's going to happen is whatever's already been happening. Because the intention is what gives direction. If you don't have an intention, then just whatever's already been happening is what will happen. So there's what's already been happening. We call that status quo. We could call that the present stable reality. We could call that the past, however you want to think of it. That has a tendency to continue to perpetuate itself unless you have a clear intention. So the clear intention allows you to actually introduce change. So you have to have intention if you want to accomplish anything. Now, even though this is obvious and at least should be obvious, and many people will, despite the suggestion that I gave to actually take a look and check that out for themselves, nonetheless, most people I know will probably still dismiss it and say, yeah, well, whatever, this is stupid. But just check it out and notice that actually most of the things that you think you want are really what you don't want. So you're really mostly just reacting to the existing status quo. So you say, I don't want these things. I don't want the problems that I experience in all these ways. I don't want the unhappiness. I don't want the conflicts. I don't want the debt. I don't want the pain. I don't want I don't want the anxiety. I don't want fill in the blank, all the things you don't want. So then you can frame that as something that you want, but it's usually most often it's just what you don't want. So you might say, I want to be free of the anxiety. I want to get rid of the debt. I want to fix the relationship problems. I want to have whatever but it's really just what you don't want dressed up. And so what happens is then your attention and therefore your energy is just going to what you don't want because you have not actually defined what you do want as a clear intention in and of itself. You're just settling for the status quo of what's already there, and then you're saying, I don't want that. So in order to have a clear intention of what you do want, you actually have to define what you do want as something independent of what you don't want. And this requires a little bit of something on your part. So if you're not willing to invest something, then you can't achieve this. You have to be willing to invest something. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to actually move against the status quo. I'm willing to actually invest something of myself to get clarity about what I actually want as a thing independent of the status quo, independent of what I don't want. Not as a reaction, but as something arising that's new. I'm willing to do that. So you have to be willing to actually invest that. Otherwise, you cannot expect anything new. You have to be willing to invest in order to get something new. So that's the first thing, is to have clarity of intention. The second thing, and again, this will not be a surprise to anybody, I don't think, who's been around here before, is attention. So your attention is what directs your energy. So your attention is, you could think about it like shining a light. So you shine the light of awareness through your attention onto an intention. So just having an intention is not enough in and of itself, because you actually have to be willing to sustain attention on it. So anybody who's written a New Year's resolution, for example, would likely know this, that just momentarily having an intention is not sufficient in order to actually materialize it or achieve it or accomplish it. You have to be willing to sustain attention on it. So attention is your power of giving energy to an intention. So how does that work? Well, you could notice that right now, at least to some degree, at least if I do something like, like that, then momentarily get your attention. So you notice that your attention is actually focused on something right now, consciously. Now, your attention is always going to something, but you want to actually direct your attention consciously to what it is that you want. Otherwise, what happens is your attention drifts to other things, which are going to be the status quo, is going to be stuff coming out of the past, repetitive history. So that will just repeat over and over and over. All of the, just notice how the habit is just to repeat the same old, same old. The old grievances, the old anxieties, the old regrets, the old frustrations, the old lack, just go over and over and over the old stuff, which is why you tend to get more of the same. Because attention, wherever attention goes, that's where your energy goes. So that's where you are investing your energy. So wherever you put your attention, consciously or unconsciously, that's where the energy goes. So if you don't choose to do that consciously, then the tendency will be for the attention to go to whatever is already established. So you'll just keep repeating more and more and more of the same. So attention is the second essential. So the first is intention. You need to have clarity of what it is that you want as something independent and genuinely a positive thing that you want, not just negating what you don't want. The second thing is you need to sustain attention on the intention. So in some sense, that's all there is to it. On the other hand, we have this problem, which is that we don't usually seem to be able to do that. I mean, it sounds good in theory, right? I mean, just be clear about what you want, and then sustain your attention on it. Easy peasy. Then you can achieve whatever you want. And as I said, it's somewhat true. I mean, it's not true. It's just that there's a missing piece, which is where a lot of people get frustrated because they say, well, okay, but I don't seem to be able to do that. I can put my attention on what I want a little bit here and there when I remember, like maybe once a day for half a second, or maybe like once a week, I remember, maybe once a month, I remember. I mean, if you really tell the truth, it's like that, right? I mean, unless you really have learned to 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 master this to some degree, then the tendency is that first of all, you don't even know what you really want. Most people are walking around not even really knowing what they want. They just know what they don't want. And then, even for those who have gotten to that stage where they know what they want, if they haven't gotten, if they have not made sufficient progress along this path, then they will remember to put attention on that very infrequently. Usually at best once a day, but more often it'll be, like I said, like once a month. They'll be like, oh yeah, what was that thing I wanted? Oh yeah. Now, if you're far enough along on this path, then that might seem crazy to you because you might say, what? How could that be? But just check it out. Notice in your life in the past that that's been true. So you just were lulled to sleep, and you basically became the status quo. There was no real you apart from the status quo. So you just became the status quo. You were basically asleep, which is shocking to realize, maybe, but it is the truth. If you really notice, you've been asleep almost your whole life, unless you're a very rare individual. But even when we think we're awake, most of us are asleep. And by asleep, what I mean is that you have no ability in that sleep state to actually choose anything because you're not really there. So on the one hand, unconsciously, you're registering things. So I'm not saying that you couldn't recall what you did, on that first day of kindergarten or whatever. What I'm saying is that despite the fact that there was an unconscious registering of things happening, you were not conscious and present enough to make choices. Instead, it was all unconscious happenings. It was just reactions. So it was all based on the past. But because what you want is something new, that means that in order to accomplish that, you actually have to be present so that you can regularly put your attention on that so that you can create it, so you can call it forth. So this is why this requires this third essential, which we could call by many names. I'm going to call it conscious awareness. So I'm distinguishing uh, conscious awareness from awareness in this context. I might use the terms differently at other times, but here for this talk, for this conversation, I'm using the term conscious awareness, and that's distinguished from mere awareness. So in this context, I would use the term awareness to refer to that registering of experience. So it's all being registered, but there's no volition exercised in that state. So now I'm talking about an active state of conscious awareness where you're awake and you have the ability to choose. So that's the third essential. And so it might seem to some people that they would say, well, I'm always consciously aware. And I would argue that probably not. If you're here, probably not. And so that's why I'm making this distinction to say, yes, of course, you can remember things, but merely remembering things does not mean that you were consciously aware. It just means that there was basic awareness, but that basic awareness is not necessarily conscious. You are mostly asleep most of the time. And so the goal here is to become awake, consciously aware, so that you can exercise your creative powers in order to achieve whatever it is that you want. So this is the piece that uh, I think is most elusive for most people. How to be consciously aware. It's somewhat puzzling because, as I said, most people would think that they are consciously aware most of the time when in fact they're asleep. So the first thing is just to even recognize that you're not consciously aware most of the time. Because if you already insist that you are consciously aware, then and you're not, then there's not much hope there for changing anything. If you say I'm already, it'd be like if you said, imagine somebody who's they never get up off the couch, but they insist that they're already a master at running. Okay, well, what's the likelihood that they're actually going to improve? But pretty much none, because they already insist that they're a master at it, despite the fact that they're not, despite the fact that they're just on the couch, not moving. So they're not running. They have no real mastery of running because they don't run. They just sit on the couch. But as long as they believe that they're a master at running, they will not get up off the couch and run. Because to actually get up off the couch and try to run would demonstrate that their belief about themselves is completely wrong. And that's probably going to be uncomfortable. So, so maybe that's the first piece of this is to understand that to begin to develop conscious awareness may at times be uncomfortable. So I'm not suggesting it has to be uncomfortable. I'm not suggesting that it should be uncomfortable. Uh, I'm not saying that that should be your measure as to whether or not you're consciously aware, that you have to be, you should feel uncomfortable in order to know that you're consciously aware, or even that all discomfort indicates conscious awareness. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it may sometimes be uncomfortable. So if you have the expectation that being consciously aware will be always pleasant and comfortable, then that might be problematic for you. Whereas if you understand that sometimes being consciously aware may be uncomfortable, then at the very least, you won't prevent yourself from being consciously aware just because you try to avoid being uncomfortable. So if you accept that being consciously aware may sometimes be uncomfortable and you're willing to sometimes be uncomfortable, that would be a good start. Then well, let's just take a look at what are the benefits of being consciously aware. So in order to just take a step back, just to reiterate the first two steps. So you have, in order to accomplish anything, you have to know what you want and you have to then sustain attention on that intention. So you're not able presently to sustain your attention sufficiently on what it is that you want in order to accomplish that, at least not in the kind of time frame and with the kind of ease that you would like. So instead, what happens is that maybe if you have any clarity at all about what you want, you can every once in a while put your attention on it. And so that might be once a day, it might be twice a day, it might be 3 times a day, it might be 5 times a day, it might be once a month. But whatever that frequency is, uh, it's not nearly as frequent nor sustained. The duration nor frequency is sufficient for you to achieve the kinds of outcomes on the kind of time frame that you're really interested in, because you want to have greater achievement faster than what you're presently experiencing. And that's just a result of lack of sufficient sustained attention on the intention. Because the basic equation is that the attention directs the energy to the intention so that the intention grows according to how much energy it receives. And it receives energy according to how much attention you give to it. So if you are able to sustain 1 second of attention once per day, then that's better than no attention. It's better than 1 second of attention once per month. In fact, that's better than 5 seconds of attention or 10 seconds of attention or even 20 seconds of attention once a month. Because if you can sustain 1 second of attention every day for a month, then that's 30 seconds over the course of a month. So not a lot, but it's something. So as long as you persist in that, if you do that every single day, then that will add up. So don't lose heart and think that, oh, it's all hopeless. Don't bother because it's too much. No, I mean, if you would just put attention on something consciously for 1 second every day, and you persist in that over many months and then years, you would make progress, significant progress, noticeable progress toward that thing. But uh, probably not nearly the kind of progress that you would prefer. A lot of the things that we want to accomplish, we would like to accomplish them much faster and easier than what we've been seemingly able to do up to now. And that's why I'm pointing out that it's a matter of how much attention you can put on it. So there are two things that are involved in this. One is duration of sustained attention. So how long can you sustain the attention? So if you can only sustain attention for 1 second, that's not much. If you can sustain attention for 20 seconds, that's a lot more. Doesn't seem like a lot, 20 seconds, but on the other hand, it's a lot more than 1 second. It's 20 times 1 second. And in fact, being able to sustain attention on something for 20 seconds is significant, gives you significantly more results than 21-second intervals. The reason why is because there's something lost in the transition between when you switch, when attention switches from one thing to another. There's something lost. This has actually been measured. There's a name that's used for this, which is what it's, I don't remember. But it's actually been measured that when attention switches from one thing to another, then it takes a while before all of the attention can switch over to the new thing. So there's some amount of the attention that stays with the previous thing or things when you first switch. So it takes actually quite a while before all of the attention goes to the new thing. So if you only put attention on something for 1 second, then it's a relatively small amount of your attention actually that goes to it. Again, it's better than nothing. But if you can sustain your attention on the thing for 20 seconds, it's still not optimal because there's still a lot of your attention that's still on the previous thing. But more and more of your attention goes to the new thing. So that when you keep your attention on it for 20 seconds, again, like I said, that's much more than the sum of 21-second intervals because of this switching issue that goes on. So if you can train your attention to be able to keep your attention on something for a longer duration, that's one thing that's very helpful. Significantly increases your efficiency when you can sustain attention on one thing for a longer period of time. Then the second factor is frequency. So how frequently do you put your attention on something? So like I said earlier, if you only put your attention on something once per day for 1 second, then over time, you need a lot of time, many, many, many days before that's going to become significant. If you put your attention on that thing 5 times each day, then you will achieve the outcome 5 times faster. And if you could sustain your attention on that thing for 20 seconds 5 times per day, then the outcome would be more than 100 times if you only put your attention on it for 1 second each day, because 20 times 5 is 100. So that's 100 times, but it's more than that because of this attention switching issue. So it's maybe like 1,000-fold or even 10,000-fold. I don't have exact numbers on that, but it would be very significant, a very significant increase. So the two things that are the two variables when it comes to putting your attention on things is how frequently and what's the duration. Of the two, duration is a bigger lever because of the attention switching issue. So if you can train to keep your attention on something for longer, then a longer duration, then that's really powerful. But frequency is also useful, no question about it. And frequency in many ways is easier, at least initially, to train because you could just put that form habits. So we all have routine. We already have routine in our lives, whether you're aware of that or not. You definitely do. If you think about it, even if you don't get up at the same time every day, you probably have the same ritual for when you do get up. And for some people, that's working well for you, and for some people, it's not. Right. So unfortunately, a lot of people have the habit. They first thing they do when they wake up is they start scrolling on their phone. So what's happening there is that your attention is being drawn to all the things that other people want to have your attention directed to instead of what you're choosing to direct your attention to. So I would definitely not recommend that as part of your routine. But if you think about it, the very first thing that happens for everybody when they wake up is that they wake up. And so cultivating conscious awareness of that moment is really powerful because it allows you to insert something new. So then you could set the tone of your day by inserting something at that very moment. So the first most powerful trigger of your day is waking up. And most people are not aware, not consciously aware of that moment, which means that they don't have the ability to insert anything there. Now, once you've become consciously aware and you've added a new habit and you've inserted something there that's useful and functional for you, then the good news is you don't even have to be consciously aware of that moment anymore because it's happening automatically. That's the power of habit. When you have a habit that's working for you, you don't even have to be consciously aware. It's just working for you. But it can work the other way too. If you have a habit that's not working for you, then that's bad. That's problematic. But you can form habits intentionally that are working for you, and that can be really useful. So one of the most useful habits to form is to insert immediately upon waking what it is you want to put your attention on. So what is the one thought? What is the one image? What is the one thing that you most want? And could you imagine yourself putting your attention on that first thing when you wake up every morning? And what could you do to support you in that? So you can also utilize other things to support you in that. Like you could make a note for yourself, a reminder of some kind that would help you, and put that in, put the note on your bedstand or on your closet door or on the bedroom door, or something that will remind you right away so that you can remember to put your attention on that which you most want. So, like I said, frequency is usually initially easier to train because all you have to do is insert reminders that will help you to do that. So you can just start to establish the new habit. So you could insert reminders like at like for meal times. Meal times are also powerful anchors because most people eat most days. So you could use meal times as a trigger to remind you to put your attention on something that you want. Same with going to bed, same with if you shower, if you commute, you could use all of those as anchors to remind you. So you could establish those new habits to be able to remind yourself to put your attention. So that's the easiest thing for most people is initially to increase the frequency with which they put their attention on whatever it is they want. So there's that. However, as I said, you get much more leverage with increasing the duration with which you can sustain attention on something that you want. And so in order to do that requires conscious awareness because you have to actually become aware of why you're not sustaining attention. You have to become aware of where your attention is going and why it is going there. So just notice, so what is it that you want in life? Just form an intention of what you want. Could be long term, could be short term, but something you genuinely want. Just form that intention. And put your attention on that now, and then just notice what happens. So at some point, you'll find that your attention shifts to something else. Now, if you're unaware of that, then you cannot hope to increase the duration with which you sustain attention on something. So, in order to increase the duration that you keep your attention on what you want, you have to be aware, consciously aware of when and why and how your attention is shifting to something else. And so that's the most fundamental practice, is just that. So if you wanted one simple, powerful practice to help you to train yourself to be more consciously aware, and uh, to also be able to train yourself to sustain your attention on something that you want, that would be one way to do it, is just train yourself, practice exactly that. So just have a practice schedule and a ritual, a routine that you do. So you could define that for yourself. How many times will you do that and when will you do it? So you could establish that habit, so you could do it like first thing in the morning, or just before you eat breakfast, or just before you eat lunch, or when you're showering. One of those times, all of those times each day, and then just make that a new habit that you practice. So put your attention on what you want. You can do it again now. Just put your attention on what you want. So you could think about it, imagine it, and just notice at what point does your attention move away from that. So I would not recommend that you try and use force. Don't try and strain to hold your attention on something. It's just about becoming aware. Because if you're trying to use force or strain, then you're trying to use your willpower, and that's a non-renewable resource. So you can quickly run out of that. But what you can do instead is train yourself to be consciously aware. So you just relax and just be aware and notice what happens. And you notice at some point the attention shifts. Well, what does it go to? And how does that happen? What is your experience? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? So by doing this, you can start to become aware of what the actual process is. When you become aware of the process, then you have information that allows you to make intelligent changes. Otherwise, it's inefficient. So you could try and make changes through force, but like I said, it's a non-renewable resource, and you would definitely fail, because if you're not aware of what's actually happening, then you're just going to be squandering your energy trying to resist something. Versus when you have the conscious awareness of it, when you actually are aware of what is what is prompting this shift of attention. What are the feelings? What are the thoughts? What are you imagining? Become aware of the actual sequence of events in that process. Slow it down. Then you have the ability to intervene because you have more information. So, for example, when you put your attention on what you want, which you could do again now, usually it's going to be one of two things. Okay. There's broad categories. So one would be you might notice that you have some kind of emotional conflict. So you start to feel something. And the other likely possibility would be that you would have a lack of clarity about how to achieve it. So I'll just give a specific example just so this can be clear what I'm talking about. So let's imagine I'll use my standard example, which some people dislike, but that's not my problem. So let's imagine that I have a desire for $1 million. And this would work for any kind of intention. But I'm just using this example just so we can have something to work with that will be clear. So if I have a desire for $1 million, then I could put my attention on that. So okay, I have $1 million. Imagining having $1 million. Now, at some point, I'm going to notice that my attention is starting to shift away from that, and I could just pause and slow down and notice what's really happening. Well, I'm likely to notice that it's probably one of these two things. So, like I said, one possibility is that I'm feeling something. There's some kind of emotional conflict that I'm experiencing. So maybe, maybe I just notice, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Maybe I'm feeling afraid. Maybe I'm feeling angry. Okay, so I might just notice that, and then I could even slow it down a little bit more and notice, okay, what's underneath that? What's motivating that? What's the process by which I'm getting to that emotional state or that emotional conflict? And there's a process there, so there's some kind of thought or feeling or some kind of thing that I'm imagining. So maybe I'm imagining, well, in order to maybe I'm imagining that the only way to have $1 million is to be what I would consider to be a bad person. So I've all of a sudden I've identified a belief that I have a limiting belief. In order to have $1 million, I'd have to be a bad person. Only bad people have lots of money. I'm just giving an example. You might not have that belief. I'm just giving an example of something that might happen. So I could notice that there's some kind of emotional conflict, some kind of feeling that I'm experiencing is unpleasant, which is causing my attention to drift away from what it is that I want. Because I'm not. We have a natural intelligence in us that wants uh, harmony, wants ease, wants pleasure, and so you cannot force yourself to sustain attention when it's unpleasant or painful for too long. You can do it for brief moments, but so they're appropriate uses of willpower, but it should be used very judiciously because you want to actually only use that just enough to allow yourself to look and peer beneath that and see what's the process that's resulting in this unpleasantness. Not just to try to stay with it and oh, I'll just stay with the unpleasantness. I'll just stay with the fear. I'll just stay with the anger. That doesn't work. You can't do that for very long. You have to allow for either consciously or unconsciously, whatever's underneath that to be freed up. So what I'm proposing here is to actually allow that consciously. You could allow it to happen otherwise, but I find that it's usually, in most cases, it's easier to do consciously. So just be curious. Okay, here's this feeling. What's happening? Slow it down even more. What's happening underneath that? What's happening before that? There's some kind of process, some kind of thought or belief or image that's resulting in that feeling. And that will reveal something like a limiting belief. So for those who were here last week, or for those who've participated in the Manifesting Truth program, or for those who've participated in the Meaning Mastery program, then you have a variety of tools that are available to you by which you can process limiting beliefs and release them. So if you've the talk from last week is freely available on YouTube. So anybody who has not watched that, you can check that out. What was it called? I don't remember. If you're really interested, you'll find it. But in that talk, I gave very simple technique that is very effective. Somebody says change beliefs. Yeah, it's something about changing beliefs. Uh, so you could use that process. You could use any of the processes that I've shared in other programs, or if I've shared something with you one-on-one. You have tools, or if you know of a process that works well for you, you can use that process in order to release those. But notice first you have to be aware. You have to be consciously aware. You have to actually know and see them and be consciously aware of them. So then the other possibility, like I said, is that there could be some kind of lack of clarity about how to achieve the thing, right? So I gave the one example, if I'm imagining this intention, I have $1 million, and there could be an emotional conflict that could come up, which is what I just described. And so then underneath that would be probably a limiting belief, which could be released, or some other the same process that I shared last week can be used whether you process it as a limiting belief, you process it just as even just at the emotional level. Okay, but you can use that process to release that. Now, in the second case, the second scenario that I described would be if there's a lack of clarity about how to achieve it. So it's possible that I'm imagining, okay, I have $1 million, and then I could notice my attention is drifting to something else. Why? Because I just don't know how to do it. So again, there's a natural intelligence in us that wants to put attention on those things that we know how to do. And so if I'm trying to put my attention on something that I don't know how to do, or that I'm not conscious of knowing how to do, then the tendency will for the attention to drift away from that because it requires energy. It's difficult. It's unpleasant. We experience it as unpleasant, at least. We feel uncomfortable, out of our league, uncertain, insecure, and so our attention will start to drift to something else. So if you become aware, okay, yes, so what's happening is I just don't even know what steps to take. Just feel confused about how I would even begin on this process. So then the good news is you can process that basically the same way that I with the emotional conflict, because it's basically also an emotional conflict. It's just that you want to first identify, okay, what's happening here is I'm just feeling overwhelmed because I don't have clarity about how to achieve it. So it seems overwhelming. It's like trying to bite off more than I can chew. So then you can process that because there's also an emotional component to that, right? So if I'm feeling that way, well, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling these things. So I could then slow that down, either just process it at the emotional level or even slow it down more and find out what's the process that's producing that. So maybe if I really slow it down, and this requires more practice to develop more conscious awareness. The more conscious awareness you have, the more you can break it down and slow it down and find out what are the earliest, subtlest parts of the process, because the earlier subtle parts of the process give you more leverage. You can change those more easily and more completely to give you even more thorough results. So if you can really dial it back and find out very early on in the process, what are the thoughts, beliefs, images that are producing this outcome of the attention shifting away, then release that. Then what you'll find is more and more you can sustain attention on what you want. Why? Because you don't have the conflicts anymore. So just think about it. When you feel good about something, isn't it easy to keep your attention on it? You don't have to try, you just naturally do. I mean, if you're really enjoying yourself, it's effortless to stay engaged with it. It's effortless to keep your attention on it. You don't have to consciously do it. But if you are not enjoying yourself, if you're experiencing inner conflicts, if you're experiencing lack of clarity about your process of achieving whatever it is that you want, then that's going to tend to lead your attention to drift to something else. Again, just because there's a natural intelligence in you that wants to conserve energy, does not want to waste energy on the inner conflict. So it's just like, oh, there's inner conflict here. Go somewhere else. Let's take the easy path, which would be fine, except that in this case, you're wanting to sustain your attention on what you want. This is why you have to, that's why I said at the beginning, in order to get the results, you have to be willing to invest something. So if you say, well, the whole process has to be completely easy from start to finish, then you will shortchange yourself. On the other hand, if you go to the other extreme, you say, I'm willing to endure endless pain and misery to achieve my outcome. You will not, because that would be trying to use willpower, just forcibly trying to achieve the outcome. And what I'm proposing is use willpower very judiciously, just enough to remind yourself that in order to achieve what you want, you need to be able to sustain your attention on it. And you want to train yourself to sustain attention by increasing your capacity for conscious awareness. So you want to basically use your willpower in very small amounts in order to train yourself to have more conscious awareness so that you have less inner resistance, and therefore you can more easily sustain your attention on what you want, because it naturally becomes easier and effortless to do. But that comes through the cultivation of conscious awareness. So the basic practice again for that is to have a habit and a ritual every day of putting your attention on what you want, and then observing, when does your attention drift away and what is happening? And slow that down and just notice, what is it? So is there an emotional conflict? Is there a lack of clarity about what it is that you need to do in order to achieve that? And then you can use the tools that I've made available in order to process either one of those. And the more you practice, the more consciously aware you can become, so you can start to even look and find out what's prior to that in the process. So there's always an inner process by which things occur. Oftentimes, we think that things just happen because we're not aware consciously of the process. So it seems like when people are not sufficiently consciously aware, then they'll believe that they just get angry, or they just get happy, or they just like something, or they just don't like something. And that's inaccurate. So lack of conscious awareness around those things means that you don't have any choice. So if you think that you just get angry, then you have no ability to make any change there. And if that's working well for you, that's great. But chances are, if you're struggling with anger a lot, then that's not working well for you. Or if you struggle with feeling hopeless or powerless or jealous or afraid or anxious, whatever those things that you struggle with, if you think they just happen, then you don't have any ability to make any change. All you can do is just hope. Or you can keep watching more YouTube videos for some kind of special thing that's going to change that. And I can't deny maybe there will be some special thing that will change that. But how many more YouTube videos do you think you're going to have to watch to find that? How many more specialists and healers and therapists and psychedelics and whatever are you going to have to do before you lock in to that special thing that changes it all? And that's highly unknown. It could happen on the next video or the next psychedelic session or the next whatever. Or it could be 20 years down the line, or it could never happen in this lifetime. You just don't know, because with that approach, you're just hoping. You don't have any real agency in that process, versus what I'm suggesting here gives you agency, which means that you can get the results, and you can get those results much more rapidly, because it comes through the conscious awareness of the process. Because again, everything has a process. And when you are consciously aware of the process, then you can make the changes. So just to bring it back to the example, if a person thinks that they just get angry, then all they can do is just keep hoping that that's going to change. But when that person becomes consciously aware of the process by which that anger arises, then they can start to make the changes using the tools that I've made available freely. So the process that I shared in last week's video about how to change beliefs is very, very powerful and could be used in conjunction with the things that I've talked about today to basically solve all your problems and help you achieve what you want. So just to bring it back to this example of if a person says, "Oh, I just get angry." Well, cultivate the conscious awareness. So notice when you get angry, notice how that process occurs. So you have to be willing to slow that down for yourself. Even in retrospect, you can do it. So if you suffer with getting angry or anxious or whatever the thing is for you, just notice right now in your memory, remember the last most recent time that happened or any particular time that it happened, and then slow that down for yourself so that you can become aware of what were the steps, internal steps that led to that. And when you do that, you'll start to see that there's a process. So there are some thoughts, there's some things that you imagine. And when you do that, then you can actually start to work with those. So if you have a belief that surfaces, you could use the process, any of the processes any of the tools or techniques that I've shared, including the one that I gave in the video last week, in order to process that. So then you can free yourself of that. Then you're not bound to the same patterns anymore. Now, that the same kind of you might not totally clear the entire process by which you generate that experience for yourself in one go. Okay, it might require some processing over the course of several days or even several weeks. But as long as you do it consistently, sincerely, you will see positive changes, and you will continue to see more and more positive changes over time when you do that consistently. So so today that wraps up the talk. Just to summarize, so the three essentials for accomplishment are intention, attention, and conscious awareness. And when you work with those together and they all go very well together, then you can see very, very good results in all areas of your life, both in terms of resolving your problems and accomplishing the positive things that you want in your life. So nothing that uh, there's nothing that is impossible for you when you work with these. And that's why I said at the beginning, these things are simple when you just stay with what's simple instead of thinking, oh, I have to do all the flashy things, then you can get very good results. That's not to say that some of the other things might not be helpful and complementary, but that the other things should be done only as a complement to the essentials, not in place of the essentials. Because if you don't have the foundation of the essentials, then you're making everything very difficult for yourself. So focus first on the essentials. And then once you have that in place, if you want to add in other things that can potentially be useful, just make sure that you're focused on the essentials first. And so that's all I wanted to say. For those who are here live, we'll stay on for the group coaching. For those who watch this on YouTube, just a few mentions. First of all, if you're interested in joining these meetings live, you're welcome to do so. By joining them live, you have the benefit of being able to participate in the group coaching session, which follows. And you can get the information so that you can join these live by subscribing to the mailing list, which you can do on my website at joylab.com. And also, when you subscribe to the mailing list, you'll get instant access to the free ebook, which contains 5 of the fundamental laws of creation. So I really encourage people to check that out. It can be very helpful. And for those who are interested in my support and personal guidance in understanding the fundamentals and putting those into practice in your life, you may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program, which is a paid program, and you can get more information about that at joeylott.com/manifesting-truth, and I'll provide the link to that as well as just my website, so you can sign up for either or both of the mailing list and the Manifesting Truth program in the description on YouTube. So for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to sign off now. Blessings to you, and bye for now.